I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Jamestown Public School Board to order. It is September 6, 2022 at 5:15 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room in the Jamestown Middle School. I'd like to recognize all those in the audience today. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. No communication. Does the board wish to declare any conflicts of interest on this agenda? Any conflicts of interest? Any conflicts of interest? Okay. Moving on. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Gail. Second. Second by Aaron. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Regular meeting under recognition. Gail, would you read the recognition for Bobby Ram for volunteer service, please?
I sure will. The Jamestown School Board would like to recognize and thank Mrs. Bobby Ram for service provided to the students of Jamestown Public Schools. For over 4 years, she has organized and collected monetary donations from local businesses to and purchase snacks in bulk for students at all 5 elementary school buildings. These snacks were provided to any student who is hungry or is in need of a snack. Thank you, Mrs. Ram, for your support of our students.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. And thank you, Gail, for reading that. Dan, would you read the board norms?
The board developed norms are to share and respect varied opinions and speak with a united voice once a decision has been reached, to prudently prioritize resources in a student-centric manner that aligns with the district's strategic plan, to exhibit a mindset of continuous improvement through adequate preparation for meetings and a commitment to board education, to commit to assessing board effectiveness, to ensure high-quality governance for the staff, students, and community of Jamestown.
Thank you, Dan. No correspondence, no reports. Under board education, analytical competency, board member, strengths finder analysis. Dr. Leck.
Thank you. This board education is going to be relatively brief. More than anything, I just want to draw your attention as board members and administrators. We actually also asked all of our administrators, I didn't reference that before, but we also asked them all to complete Strengths Finder, the Clifton Allen Strengths assessment. We think in general it allows us a good opportunity to see where those strengths lie, how we can leverage the skills and abilities of our board members, but also how does that tie in with our administrators as we look to create teams, but also just in general leverage our strengths that we all bring to a leadership team. Those assessments, the domains that exist for school board members, for central office administrators, building administrators, fall into 4 domains: the executing, the influencing, the relationship building, and strategic thinking. Those 4 domain areas. And I won't read what those definitions are, but you certainly can. In general, it's a pretty broad way to look at the skills and attributes, characteristics that individuals hold that represent their passions, but also how they address issues, how they deal with problem solving. If you look at, it's actually interesting as we looked at administration and the school board in terms of a domain review, very strong. If you look at administration, it was almost evenly distributed amongst 3 of the 4 domains: executing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. Those 3 were almost, percentage-wise, were very consistent with each other. Where we lacked in administration fell in the influencing domain. So if you look at 80 themes scored, only 10% of those fell in the influencing, and that represented a large chunk of those. 5 of the 8 then represented 2 administrators. So if you take those 2 individuals out, that really becomes a gap in strengths that we have to consider as we look as an administrative team to how we problem solve and how we create our teams and leverage those skills, attributes, and characteristics of administrators. If you look at the domains review of school board members, it was similar, but there's even greater strength in executing and strategic thinking, but again, underweight in that domain of influencing. So if about 4% of themes are represented in influencing, compared to 33% in executing, 24% in relationship building, and 38% in strategic thinking. So again, off weight, pretty consistently in that influencing domain. So I put just some general thoughts and strategies that I thought would be, that we should consider at the administrative level, at the board level, in terms of this domain gap. And I want to, reference the fact that this is a pretty basic analysis of StrengthsFinder. This is, I'm not going really in depth here, but I do think a handful of things that we could look at, regardless of the makeup that we make of with our teams, but decision-making and team building at a very surface level. Like I said, we're well represented in 3 of those domains, again, being executing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. Our hurdles are going to be in how we prioritize sharing information with other stakeholders, receiving feedback, gaining support for initiatives and ideas, concepts, how we're connecting to stakeholders. So things that we can think about, they might be the makeup of our teams, who in a strength area is represented in that influencing domain. We might have to be purposeful and conscientious of who represents that influencing domain when we make teams. That's one potential strategy. We might also be looking at, are we filling that gap with other people? That may not be a board member or an administrator. Maybe that has to be somebody else, a staff member or a community member or members, staff members, somebody else that fulfills that gap that we seem to have. And this isn't an all or nothing kind of assessment. It's not, the world's not on fire because, we didn't score very highly in influencing or didn't have a large representation. It just means that there's a slight gap there, and we need to be purposeful and think about it as we create teams and as we look to leverage the skills and attributes and characteristics of the people that are sitting around this table and do represent our administrators. So with that, I would stand for questions, kind of a general overview.
Any questions for Dr. Luck? Thank you for bringing that forward, that information. Moving on with your superintendent's report, Dr. Luck.
A few items to touch on. Kindergarten registration, we've talked ad nauseum in the last 8 months or so regarding kindergarten registration. I think the biggest lesson learned is we need to evolve the way we register. I think we can lament on not having people early register or register within the 2 windows, hopefully 1, but we open them up to a second window if we aren't getting the responses. We can lament about that, or we can move forward and say, well, how are we going to do this differently? And so in my perspective, we need to look at how we could better service our families, our students, but also our elementary buildings, and look to enhance that registration process to ensure that we get more people coming to the open registration windows, so we're not dealing with this again, where we're wondering how many people are going to be here and wondering about sections. These are things that we want to be able to know in the spring. So I think it's more up to us to evolve on how we're going to do that, as opposed to just how are we going to try and communicate when those windows are, because I think we just need to do better to make sure that we're getting more registration. National conferences for school board members and national regional affiliates. In the past, we've budgeted for the National Association of School Boards and for board members to attend on a rotation. But as you are likely aware from correspondence you received, the state of North Dakota withdrew from the national organization related to communications on public communication and how that was occurring, and I think the phrase was domestic terrorists. They likened somebody coming in and utilizing public communication as domestic terrorism, and that turned off a lot of states. A lot of state affiliates were upset by that and started to withdraw. And I think there's 18 that have withdrawn, including North Dakota. That becomes a little bit problematic when we schedule a rotation around a national conference. And you could still choose to move forward if you wanted to. There would be a slightly higher fee for national conferences. I know that the state of North Dakota, or I'm sorry, the North Dakota School Boards Association is looking at an organization that has been created because of this withdrawal, called COSPA, Consortium of State School Board Associations, and they're looking at organizing a national conference. I guess from my perspective, what I would suggest is we hold off. We can always reschedule national conferences, get those rotations once we figure out what that school board convention is going to look like. With so many states withdrawing, I wonder what that experience is going to be like. You know, normally that's an outstanding convention, and I would certainly advocate for board members to do it. The problem being now, I don't know what that's going to look like. And they build a convention around a budget that's built significantly around attendance. And with so many states withdrawing and not sending people, I can't see what that's going to look like or if that's going to be worth the money that you commit to it. I guess my advice or my plan would be, unless I hear differently, would be to delay until we figure out how this all works out. And I think, you know how I feel about professional learning. I think national conferences are an important part of being a board member because you learn so much, but I just want it to be a good experience. Yep.
I actually don't know where we're at in our rotation, and we've had some changeover board members, so maybe we don't even fit into a rotation right now. But if someone was thinking about going, planning on going, we could maybe have a conversation with Dr. Leck and just see, you know, when that convention is going to be held, the national one, even if it costs us a little bit more. If someone had that on their plans, I think we would have to look into considering that.
Yeah, my thought would be just to delay, and we've done that for budgetary reasons before. We just don't send anybody, and then we just push everybody to the next year. We don't skip people, but we just delay it for a year just to make sure you have a good experience. Is anybody not comfortable with that or wants me to pursue something different? Okay. A board retreat, my suggestion would be to set a board retreat in January. That's traditionally what we've done, and if you have any topics for a board retreat, please let me know. I'd be happy to do that. I do think one thing that we should probably think about is norms. We haven't done norms in a while. We should probably revisit that process and see if that still represents the norms that you want to operate under. Tuition agreements, this is just maybe more just an agenda item, but I've linked all those. You know, my suggestion would be, just for the sake of efficiency, that you approve tuition agreements in bulk rather than doing them individually. You can always, just like anything like in our consent agenda or anything organized like this, if there's ever any tuition agreement that you feel, boy, we need to have a greater conversation about this or act on it separately, let's just pull it off. But for the sake of efficiency, I think that helps. I have included quite a bit of information related to the facility projects that are occurring. There's 4 different weekly progress reports, a couple different meeting minutes, and then we have an explanation of the different change orders that will be coming up later on in your agenda. In general, things are still looking good. If you've been by the south side of this building, I'm happy to say I have a little bit of light shining in, so that's been a nice addition, and I can certainly see how the natural light is positively impacting the classroom experience, the learning environment for our students as compared to what it was. It's certainly much brighter. You'll also have a recommendation moving forward for the Lincoln parking lot project, and that's coming on later in your agenda. And my recommendation will be to accept the quote from Strata. Facility tours and building meetings on September 19th. That is the one coming up. I have the schedule in your packet, but a tour for Louis L'Amour in Washington, and then we'll have our meeting here. So if you are interested, come over to Louis first at 4 o'clock, and then we'll move over to Washington together. We'll just do a tour, talk to the building principal, look at the locations, the spaces. Sometimes, you know, when we're just visitors in a building, we see the paint in the, we see the paint in the hallways. We don't always get to see, the back areas. So it'll help give you a little bit of context to how things are in each of those buildings. And then the 3rd, 17th, 21st, and November 7th are all different meetings that I'll address as we get closer along. One of the things I wanted to make you aware of, and I don't have any information for you other than this, but we're conducting district safety assessments. There's a fairly significant assessment tool that exists. It has categories in school facility characteristics and surrounding environment, trespasser intruder assessment, neighborhood and campus facility risk factors, natural factors, technological factors, security hazards, instructional facility assessment, emergency operations planning, school climate, culture, health practices, building and grounds. It goes on, building interior and communications systems, also has athletic facilities and equipment, and then district campus website. There's a total of 625 questions on this assessment across those different categories. And I think it's going to give us a great baseline for where we are at in all of those areas in terms of assessing our facilities, assessing our security in general, and then looking to how we can improve. And so that's 625 questions happening at every building. So they're all going to create a synopsis. I'm going to get that hard data, but then just kind of a general overview. These are our priorities in each of our buildings, and we can use that then to help us better assess our security across all of those levels. And sometimes we think very narrow-mindedly of security, and there's a broader context there. And I think our community expects, and well, they should, that we are doing everything we can to assess and then move forward with improving security in our buildings. I also shared a little bit of information related to the 21st Century After School program. Last spring, I think, we talked about the potential to decrease the amount of time down to ending at 4:30. The patrons had a community meeting with the SEC related to what their needs were, and they made a shift. And they heard the concerns. I'm very happy with how the Southeast Education Cooperative did manage that. They sought out feedback from the people, the users of the after-school program, and they shifted it. And if the priority was we needed a little more time, they moved that bar from 4:30 to 5:15. And so they got an additional 45 minutes. There was a shift to the pay structure and what those fees are, but we feel like this, the individuals involved and the SEC, myself, I think this better addressed the needs that we were finding from the users of the program. So I'm happy to say, I want to give a little credit to the SEC for being willing to move that bar. So I think they did a nice job of gathering information as well. The Village Family Services, this is just a continuation of what we've been talking about, moving from 3 days a week to 5 days a week for that mental health counseling. And I actually think the general fund contribution will go down. I shouldn't say I think it will go down, because we'll have a greater support from special ed, James River Special Ed, and their ARP funds will be committed to, and I don't have a final number yet, but they're thinking $55,000, but it'll be significant. Our general fund contribution will be significantly less, regardless of what they would, of whether that amount is 50 or 55. We're going to see a decrease in what we hope to spend in that area, at least what we spent last year. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Jason, you had your hand up.
The safety assessment, time frame on that?
Well,
This school year, or?
yeah, that's the hope. Yeah, I've asked for the beginning assessment, the kind of the overview at our next administrative team meeting, and then we'll just see how that all flows out, and that'll find its way into our capital projects plan and in terms of facility upgrades. But there's other, there's not just facility upgrades to safety and security. There's other areas that we need to look at too, from our website and data safety down to our playgrounds and procedures and things like that. So,
Gail.
With that same topic in mind, I know that there have been concerns expressed to us about dropping off and picking up kids. Could we look at that as part of that assessment too? That's one that's kind of near and dear to my heart. At one of my first schools, we had a child killed after school in our parking lot. So for me, I can remember that trauma never left us. And are there things that we're just so used to how it works that we might be missing for that safety? I know many of you see me, I'm an avid walker. I mean, I walk probably 2 hours every day. And I've made a point of trying to see some of our schools. And there's a lot of stuff that's probably not legal happening. I do appreciate that our police department put out guidelines prior to school and shared those on social media. But some things that you happen when you pick up kids you're not even thinking that you're doing, or things that I do myself. Being an avid walker, I notice, I notice when people aren't at the crosswalk anymore, because I know things like that are for my own safety. But are there things that we could look at like that? Because something like that would devastate our school district. And it's something that we, I also have tried to pay attention now in other communities when I go, just to see how that's handled. And do we have things where we might need to work with the city to correct our school, maybe a city planner, looking at someone who has that traffic and safety portfolio? That's just something I would like to see us do too.
Yeah, having a partnership through a school resource officer is going to be invaluable to this whole process. We're getting a law enforcement individual perspective and not just building administrators' perspective on safety and security. So I would absolutely, traffic is a part of that. And we've already seen some, the middle school is a good example. We've already seen, a grant that ended, that we're also responsible for in terms of special assessments, part of those middle school projects, the work that we did on the south side here, the bump out corners. Those are some of the things that came through that partnership with the school resource officer. So I think that there's certainly potential for that, for those conversations to occur because of the involvement of the school resource officer.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Moving on to our agenda. F, old business, nothing under old business. G, new business. Number 1, activities. A, approval of a cooperative agreement with Carrington Public Schools for girls soccer. Is there a motion? Gail? Motion. Second by Diane. Is there any discussion? I had a few questions and I think Dr. Lick, you have some. I don't get questions about it when it's on an agenda from patrons and community members. It's more when the sport starts, and so girls soccer starts in the spring, and so I would anticipate maybe some questions, about it, later. So can you just kind of explain the process for this? How is it reevaluated every year? And I'm talking about agreements outside of Valley City. We have this long-standing agreements with Valley City, with a partnership on certain sports.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Valley City, the cooperatives with Valley City are different, and I think we've talked about this in previous board education, that some of our partnerships or cooperatives with Valley City are put in place to ensure that a program can exist. Swimming on its own without a cooperative with Valley City, for example, would be very hard for the program. And I agree that Valley City is different. I think the question comes along our rural districts within the area. And so typically the process is they would reach out to us and ask, hey, we have a girls soccer player. We don't have a girls soccer program, but this is an individual that wants to participate. Is a cooperative appropriate? And so we assess that need at that time based on our current need. And we say, yes, we would bring that forward to our board or not. So usually Mr. Roldson that process would start with him. He would respond to me and say, hey, we had a request. I would like to move forward. I think it would benefit the program. Are you agreeable to that? I would probably ask him some questions about, does this require an extra coach? Would there be any additional expenses that would be required? Something like that. And then we would, if I feel comfortable, then we bring that recommendation to the board. To answer your question, they're not assessed every year unless there would deem to be a need. If they're, for example, if we had a cooperative agreement with Carrington, because that's who we're talking about for girls soccer, this year we have 1. Next year there was 10 kids that wanted to play. Now, and that would precipitate us needing to hire an additional coach. Now we might have to have a different conversation about a cost-sharing agreement or something like that that might be necessary for us to have that cooperative. But they're not assessed and rescinded every year. In my opinion, that would just bring a constant level of agreements back and forth to the board where you might have to dissolve an agreement at the end of the soccer season. Next year, you're coming back, oh, she's just a junior now, so now we need to have this agreement again. Now she's a senior, you dissolve it at the end of the year, and you come back and you're doing that again. I think that's covered to a degree. Some of that cost is covered because in cooperative agreements, if you have no students participating, the district doesn't have a fee. If you have students participating, there is a fee. So that's a $300 fee that would be assessed every year in which the student participating in that activity is participating. So if there is one in Carrington, but we have an agreement with Pingree, and there's no student in Pingree, Pingree wouldn't pay. But there would be an activity fee that would be paid by the family. There'd be a cooperative fee that paid by the joining district. But we would assess that only in the event that we felt it was appropriate. Otherwise, we just let them stand. And we dissolve them if we need to or feel it's appropriate to dissolve them. But generally, we don't, just because I think it would just bring a constant agreement overload to the board as it's necessary.
Like I said, I think sometimes when the sport starts is when we'll often get questions, so it's good to have that information, so if you get questions about it. So we have a motion and a second in discussion to approve a cooperative agreement with Carrington Public Schools for girls soccer. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Number 2, buildings and grounds. A, approval of change order number 1 for high school facility project. Is there a motion? Motion by Dan. Second by Steve. Any discussion on the change order number 1 for the high school facility project? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. B, approval of change order number 7 for Gusner Elementary Facility Project. Is there a motion? Motion by Gail. Is that Dan? Okay. Yeah, Dan. Okay. Second by Dan. Any discussion? There's a motion and a second for approval of change order number 7 for Gusner Elementary Facility Project. I'm glad those change orders aren't in double digits. So all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. C, approval of change order number 8 for Gusner Elementary Facility Project. Is there a motion? Motion by Jason, second by Dan. Any discussion? We have a motion and a second for approval of change order number 8 for Gusner Elementary Facility Project. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Approval of change order number 9 for Gusner Elementary Facility Project. Is there a motion? Motion by Gail. Second by Diane. Any discussion? We have a motion and a second for approval of change order number 9 for Gusner Elementary Facility Project. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. E, approval to award Lincoln Parking Lot Project. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron? Oh,
The recommendation was award to Strata.
Yep, for the Lincoln Parking Lot Project. Motion by Aaron. Second by Steve. Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Aaron.
Just with both bids that came in essentially being equal, can you just describe rationale for the recommendation on
Yeah,
Strata?
I think it's a great question, a fair question. There's no doubt to me that either one of the businesses that quoted the project would do outstanding work. I think that they met all of the criteria and expectations, and it really did come down to, although the cost was very marginal, it was a factor. Which one was lower than the other? And I think we can look at a number and say, well, that amount is arbitrary because it's only so much. But it is different. And I looked at higher versus lower. It's as simple as that. I thought both companies would do outstanding work. No concerns about that. But it did come down to higher, lower. I didn't quantify the amount difference. I simply said higher or lower. And the one was higher and one was lower. And I think we sometimes, I want to be cautious about, well, that amount is arbitrary. because that's negligible. Well, it is very close, but what is that line then for me to decide when is it not arbitrary or when is it not negligible? Is that $1,000 difference? Is it $10,000 difference? Is it $15,000 difference? What's the difference? And I get it. It's a very, very small number, but one is higher and one is lower. And I thought both businesses could do, like I said, both businesses could do the work. They would do it well. They would do it within the timeline. They would meet all of our expectations. That was the difference. And it's as simple as that.
Any follow-up, Aaron? Go ahead.
So this project is not in the capital projects plan as it sits today. So funding for this, are we looking at possibly utilizing unspent contingencies from others, or how is this going to be funded?
Well, it would have to be funded through those contingency funds or a general fund commitment that we would have to make. Unfortunately, I don't think that we have an option to not fund it. But that would, the hope would be we could fund it through the contingency budget that we have submitted to our other projects, that would be able to cover it. And if not, the available building fund or the, a little savings on other building fund projects or building fund projects, not our building projects, but building fund projects. And if we have to have a commitment from the general fund, we may have to support the building fund with that. But I just don't see a different option other than doing this project.
Yep, go ahead, Aaron.
So just with our two mature projects that we have going right now with Gusner and the middle school, there is, even with the change orders we just approved, it's roughly, what, 110,000, I think, in those contingencies. And again, those projects are fairly mature. The risk on additional contingencies should be fairly low. Right. So that would be an area then that we could look at to do this.
That would be the initial plan, is to use that unfunded or the unused contingency for the projects. But then if you remember, we also, that was part of this middle school, there is a design contingency also. I think we should be able to cover it. I just want to make sure, I don't know what could happen between now and the, substantial completion. I think we're going to be fine, but I think we'll have more than enough funding in that contingency, but I just don't see an option as to not do this project. I just wish it would have come up sooner.
And just for the public's information, you want to just share, Dr. Leck, the reason we're having to, the parking isn't available where we used to park, right? And so we're making a lot on the end of Lincoln where the transitional house.
Yeah, so people familiar with Lincoln campus, they'll remember there used to be a transition house that existed for a program for our students with needs beyond K-12. We were preparing them for life to live on their own. So we do educate students all the way to age 21. And so some of the students that aren't quite ready for graduation yet, they need other life skill development, we place them in a transition house to support that growth. So that program used to exist in a residence that was located on Lincoln Elementary campus. That house was sold. We moved the transition house to the high school campus in the old Jamestown North building, so the old alternative building. And so that left that space open. We talked about expanding the playground. When we were told that south parking lot was no longer going to be available for our parents to park, we were concerned about the bottleneck of traffic that would come with pickup and delivery. And we felt that if there was a location for our teachers to park, that would eliminate some of that bottleneck, hopefully as much of it as possible. I don't know if it could eliminate every instance of bottlenecking. That's a high concentration of people getting picked up at any one time in any of our buildings. But I think we can eliminate a lot of that bottleneck by getting our teachers parking off the street. If they can't park in that south parking lot, getting them parking off street. And so we looked at a couple different options. That was determined to be the most cost-effective option. So it did eliminate some growth opportunities we had for the parking lot or for the playground, but I think it's long-term the best situation. But we're just not able to park in that south parking lot any longer.
Thank you for sharing the context around the agenda item. So we have a motion and a second to approve, to award the Lincoln parking lot project to Strata. Is there any other discussion on this agenda item for the board? Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. And we'd like to thank all of the businesses that bid on these projects and to help us complete our projects that need to be done. So, number 3, curriculum assessment and instruction. Nothing under there. Under finance, we have A, approval to submit the Building Tomorrow's Leaders Grant. Is there a motion? Motion by Gail? Is there a second? Second by Dan. Any discussion on this grant? We have a motion and a second to approve to submit the Building Tomorrow's Leaders Grant. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. B, approval of the Wilson and Eagles Arena agreement with the Jamestown Park and Rec for the 2022 to 2023 school year in the amount of $29,500. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron. Second by Gail. Any discussion? Dr. Leck, do you want to talk about any changes to this? Or?
It has consistently increased the same amount, and it's been consistent. I think it's $250.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second for approval of the Wilson and Eagles Arena agreement with the Jamestown Park and Rec for the 2022 to 2023 school year in the amount of $29,500. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. C, approval of the agreement with Village Family Services for certified mental health counseling services in the amount of $65,000. Is there a motion? Motion by Diane. Second by Steve. Any discussion? We have a motion and a second for approval of the agreement with Village Family Services for certified mental health counseling services in the amount of $65,000. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Number 5, personnel. A, approval of MOU for special education technician. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron. Second by Dan. Any discussion? We have a motion and a second for approval of MOU for special education technician. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. 6, policy and procedures. A, approval of the second reading of policy ABEB, child nutrition programs, and subsequent 1, approval of the second reading of ABEB-BR1, child nutrition program civil rights complaint procedure, and number 2, approval of the second reading of the ABEB-BR2, free and reduced price meal eligibility appeals. Is there a motion? Motion by Gail. Is there a second? Second by Dan. Any discussion on this? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. B, approval of the second reading of policy IDC, data protection and security breaches, and subsequent 1, approval of the second reading of IDC-AR, security breaches procedure. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron. Second by Jason. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. C, approval of the amended policy BCAD, executive session. Is there a motion? Motion by Dan. Second by Aaron. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Approval of the amended policy DCAB, fringe benefits, and subsequent approval of the amended DCAB-AR, fringe benefit regulations. Is there a motion? Motion by Gail. Is there a second? Second by Aaron. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Number 7, tuition. A, approval of the 2022 to 2023 tuition agreements. And there are 10 of these. How would the board like to proceed? Gail? Yep. And 1 through 10. Go ahead.
I move that we approve 1 through 10 as one group.
So we have a motion.
And I forgot that.
Yep.
The tuition
The tuition
agreements.
agreements, yep.
That was so articulate.
There's a motion to approve the 2022 to 2023 tuition agreements 1 through 10. Is there a second? Or would anyone like to remove any of them? Second by Aaron. So we have a motion and a second for approval of the 2022 to 2023 tuition agreements 1 through 10 listed on the agenda. Any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. 8, other. Approval of memorandum of understanding with Southeast Educational Cooperative for the after-school program. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron. Second by Diane. Any discussion on this? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Items for future agenda. Are there any items for future agenda? Okay, let Dr. Luck or myself know. Also, think about that retreat we have in January. If there's some topics we want to kind of dig deeper into and get some more board education and learn more about, there's a couple of things I kind of have in mind as well. And so start thinking about some of those and we can start compiling an agenda for that. Meetings to be scheduled. A, Health Insurance Committee meeting on Monday, September 12th, 2022 at 3:45 p.m. in the multipurpose room. B, school board members facility tour of Louis L'Amour and Washington Elementary beginning at 4 p.m. on Monday, September 19th, 2022. C, school board meeting on Monday, September 19th, 2022 at 5:15 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room. And D, budget hearing on Monday, September 19th, 2022 at 6 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room. The monthly superintendent evaluation is Section 3, Human Resources Management, and Section 5. Yep, sorry. Go ahead, Aaron.
There was a request for a facilities committee meeting scheduling. Did that, I didn't, there was a survey sent out? I haven't heard anything on that. Okay.
If you can, I believe Amy sent out a survey for that meeting, so if you can respond to that, if that works for you, or to Sally? I'm sorry, to Sally. Oh, Sally was out today, so maybe she's already has a plan for that, but
We'll post
but yeah,
that.
we'll,
We'll post that
Yep.
meeting. Yeah.
thank you.
So there's a potential facilities meeting. We'll post the meeting time and location and date. So, okay, thank you, Aaron. So we have the facilities meeting on top of our meetings to be scheduled. And then the monthly superintendent evaluation is Section 3, Human Resources Management, and Section 5, Community Relations. There being no further business before the board, the meeting is adjourned.